My name is Andrew Dunn. I'm the Director of Photography, the Cinematographer on the United States vs. Billie Holiday, and this is a Go Creative show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today's guest is Andrew Dunn BSC, the Director of Photography for the United States vs. Billie Holiday. Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real privilege, and I'd love to talk about that film because it's one of the very special ones for me. I'm talking to you from west of London, just in prep on a new film. And so please have the time to talk to you. So thank you.
Well, there is a lot to talk about. The film absolutely is great. It looks so good, and I can't wait to talk to you about kind of the way you achieved that period look without pushing too hard, and it's just so creamy and beautiful. I just can't wait. So thank you for being on. Before we get to all of that, I want to thank our sponsor, MZ Education for Creatives. Check them out at mz.com and use the promo code GCS to get 20% off. GCS20 over at mz.com. And of course, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We've got a lot of exclusive content on YouTube for you, and all things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. All right, Andrew, I was doing some research on you. You've been doing this for a while, certainly, and have just such a huge portfolio of work under your belt. And in a previous interview, you had said, and let me pull this quote up here, you talked about cinematographers being chameleons. I think that was in the Londoner, the SW Londoner. You had mentioned that quote. You even remember saying that. I loved that quote, and I wanted to start right there because I think it really it lends to your overall philosophy of what cinematography is. So, cinematographers are chameleons. What does that mean to you?
I think being a cinematographer, one has to embark on each project fresh. And one of my sayings is you try and forget what you know, so you do start fresh as a virgin. And you can forget what you know, but you can't unknow what you know. So it'll come back to you as because of your experience. So as far as being a chameleon is concerned, I embark on every project, often with the new directors, and even with directors I've worked before, that you're one, as a cinematographer, you have to be malleable and be able to pursue that particular project and what comes off the page and work on the designer, costume designer, the director, producers, writers, and the actors. You have to fit in with that, and still within that wonderful collaboration of all these people, that you produce what you want to produce, but it's falling into what the whole piece has. So there is always an ego to do. I pretend I don't have an ego, but there is always an ego involved because we're all human beings. And therefore, you're going to impart what you know and your own experience, knowledge, and input, and in collaboration with other people. So the chameleonness of it is that you will adapt and put on a new coat and not entirely shed your coat, but you'll put a new coat, and that coat will see you through this project. I've just worked with two new directors. I'm embarking, if we're starting prep today, on a new film. That's a whole new director from a new project. So again, I'm shedding a coat and putting on a new coat, and that's very exciting for me because you don't rest on either laurels or things you know or think you know before that moment. So you have to start fresh. And that's what I really mean by it.
Well, what do you think about the idea that a cinematographer kind of brings their vision to a project? The cinematographer maybe has their own particular style. Do you think that is a detriment to cinematographers to have like a specific style to them?
No, I don't. I think it's very valid. I think this our natural, as I was saying just now, the what I call ego, or our own upbringing, experience, knowledge, input, and feeding off the director, writers, and what comes off the page and the locations. You impart your own style into that, and I think if you look into most of my work, they probably will, although I might deny it. There probably is a thread of a line of a style within that, whether it's camera movement or a type of light. But you sort of don't strive against it. I use that to develop and learn and every new story has a new look, but I know there will be looks within each film I do that you'll be recognize. I think same with directors. I mean, most of the directors I admire. Most directors. One of my things is that most directors make the same film over and over again. And they can't help it. It's just the way it is, and it's natural because we're all who we are, and you're in life experience. You're going to, when the chips are down, you can tell your story. You're going to tell a story in your own way. So I think the same for us as cinematographers. In fact, I once said that I did a couple of films with Stephen Frears, and I said to Stephen, who's one of the directors I admire, I was lucky enough to work with him at the time. I said, one of the things I admire about you is that you don't make the same film. I made that quote about directors making the same film over again. I said, with you don't. They're always different. And Stephen said to me, dear boy, if you look very carefully, you'll see that I do.
And who is it that you said that to?
Stephen Frears, the director.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. So, so he was saying that if you look closer, I do?
Yes. And I think it's the same and that's like a very long time ago now, but I think that you can't help it, because although you might employ different cameras, different style of lights, I work with different gaffers and people around the world all the time. So there's always those influences on me, and I'm learning all the time. So those people come in sideways, left, upside down, and turn me around, hopefully. But you're still going to when the heat is on, in the heat of battle each day, you're going to fall back in some way or other on something and that's inevitable as a human being, that that those things come through. So, like in say, for example, the LA Story, Man is King George, Perks Being Wallflower, Precious, Gosford Park. There are in Count of Monte Cristo. There are beats within those, all of those. I'm working with different set of parameters, different locations, different directors, different stories. I think within those you will see inevitably telltale signs.
Yeah. And I mean, all of those films you mentioned just have such a distinct look about them, where it really does feel like, it almost feels like you could look and just, I don't think you would assume it was even the same cinematographer behind all those films. And I think that's really a testament to your work, is that you do allow for kind of a new look, a new feel. It's fresh every time. So let's talk about the United States versus Billie Holiday, and specifically the look of the film. How do you describe, I guess, how would you describe the look of the film? I
think what I generally try to do, and I think it's worked in this, is to treat the camera as a member of the audience. The cinema going audience and TV watchers, the whole age-old thing of all being voyeurs. So you're in the situation, you're in the room with these people, but you're not there at all. So this camera thing is that person, is the audience, clearly, because that's what it is, that's what it does. And we use it to get inside. And I desperately, but one of my sort of mantras and ways of working is to get inside the character. So it's to not, obviously we use techniques and we have to use lenses and filters and all sorts of things, but it's to feel, it's not just up close and personal, it's actually like a connection between that person and the camera. Then the audience will feel the person much more strongly, not just looking at them. You're in the story with them.
And in this case, with so many performances, you really can use that metaphor. I mean, the camera really is kind of an audience member in Billie Holiday's performances throughout the film, too.
It is. And then you're through, the choice of editing, obviously we do all the footage, but the notes, what I call it, go back to that sort of Sidney Lumet thing of a film being like a symphony, so the highs and lows, denying the audience's beats, and then you're suddenly lifting their spirits and taking them somewhere else, and the emotion of it. So we will sometimes pull back, and then you're giving the audience distance, but then the audience really want to will themselves, and you're forcing the will to get back in there. So you open up wider, and then you come back in. Not long lens. We have to use long lens. But sometimes you're really close in a wider lens, so you actually feel a real connection. So the look of it is, for me, bearing in mind what I just said, is to actually feel, and it goes for a lot of films I do, period films and elsewhere, And period is more difficult because you actually want to take the audience back into that place and not look back on it through some glass darkly, and so you're separated. You've got to be actually feel as though you're there at the time. Of course, making the actors feel comfortable in that situation makes it a lot easier for us. So that's a sort of dance that we have with the camera and the choreography of the camera, the lighting, the lenses and film stock, is that we are there with them, and then they, knowingly or unbeknowingly, they respect that and give the audience, which is us, the camera, this thing, more, and they trust it and trust us, and you're with them. You're not. It's a big thing with me, so I repeat it. You're not. You're with them in the story. You're not looking at them.
Yeah.
You're on this journey with them. So the audience has to feel as though they're there with them. So the choice of film, as opposed to digital, was not, for me, it's no-brainer, silly phrase, but it's almost a no-brainer because film has a texture, and I'm not being sort of Luddite or anti-digital, because I do a lot of digital as well, and I think that has its purpose, and that's a challenge on its own, but the film we chose for this, is to actually has a movement within each frame. So each frame, the emotion, the halation on the back of the film stock on the celluloid, it lives in the layers of the film. Will live within that.
Yeah, you're talking about the actual film itself has a little bit of motion.
It does.
It just shifts ever so slightly, and you just don't get that with digital. And that was part of the reason why you chose film for this.
It was, and it's also live, and I think the sumptuousness of it, and that's a difficult word to use because you don't want to be too sumptuous and too rich because this person had a really tough life.
Yeah.
So the beats and the journey of her has to be all the years that we cover. I mean, basically we're covering sort of 11 or 12 years, but flashbacks and elsewhere. So you're covering all the time, but you want to. You've got to respect the time and not just be, okay, I'm a cinematographer, I can use the stock, I can use the lights, I can be smart. And then it's about us. For me, it's always going to be about the actor and what they're working with is with the script and the set. So that wasn't a difficult decision because, as you just said, the film has a sort of texture and life to it. However much we try and make digital do that, digital is a different way of storytelling. And where you say that we're storytellers and we use this camera as an art form, as a sculptor's hammer and chisel, artist paintbrush, drawing, which is all these things we've said a million times before.
And it was interesting what you said too about the idea that you chose film because it breathes, it moves, and all that, but you also wanted to do a period piece that didn't look back, but made the viewer feel like they were actually in that time period. And I think there's an interesting distinction there. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because that's a very good point, because when we look back at footage as we did, and we do footage and stills of Billie Holiday, mostly black and white, and not colorized. But so therefore, we're looking back at that, and although we could have shot this in black and white, it would have felt wrong because her life was extremely colorful. And to go on that journey, to have her outside in Central Park and the Easter time, the wonderful all the kids running around and the sunlight, and it's sort of like it's a double-edged thing that you can what's the word when you're working against what you're presented, so you can sort of present something, but actually what you're really feeling, what she's doing, where the story's going is like, so you're being you're not the opposite of what you're trying to tell, but you're playing with it, and you're wrestling with the image and the thing. So that's important to use the film and these old lenses that we had, which we adjusted a little bit to tweak them a little bit more, sort of into, not a sort of vintage, again, not a vintage looking back through the 70 years of time gone by, but it's actually taking us back to that time. And of course, we all know films from the 40s and 50s that have a look about them, but they had a vast array of techniques and the journey at that time, because they were in the 50s. Films were fighting TV coming in, so they were getting into Cinerama and widescreen and other things, because that's and huge spectacles over there. So,
well, they needed a reason to compete. I mean, people had in their TVs just that square box, and just that more landscapey look, that anamorphic look, was what really drew people to the theaters at the time.
It absolutely did. So those are really, that's really what's happening then. But so we clearly didn't want to do that, and we don't want to do the really interesting cinema noir of some of those 40s and 50s films. But I think within our film there's a nod to those also. But the color, the life around her and within her, and what she did with the costumes. Fabulous costumes that Paolo created with Lee, and what the makeup and hair and things. So we want to play with that and show it off, and not sort of make it too flat. And the depth. And for me, it's always like you create dimension on the screen and depth.
So let's talk about the lens package that you chose for the United States versus Billie Holiday. You are filming and you're using film. You're creating this period piece of the 40s, 50s-ish time period. What kind of lenses do you use to create that look?
We chose initially, going with film, we wanted to shoot anamorphic. So it's not shows widescreen, and it's natural aberrations in anamorphic, and without sort of being too self-conscious about the flares, but there are natural flares, and there's so within that, and then we talking to my friends at Panavision in Montreal, London, in LA, and we found the old Panavision C series and supplemented with an E series, and then Dan Sasaki in Los Angeles, who's a genius for the lenses, tweaked them a wee bit just to make them all to match, but also to just shift a couple of elements in the middle, just to get them off kilter a little bit. Yeah, it's one of those things you hardly see it. I think one of the things that what we do, you're going to see things because that's what we do, but you're also going to feel it.
Exactly.
So you feel things. You're not always being. I mean, so many films, and I've been guilty of shooting also, are expositional, like someone standing there telling you what's happening or what's going to happen or did happen.
Well, all of those things make a difference, like you said. Like they might be minor tweaks here and there, but when everything lines up together, including the costumes and the set design and the production and just everything, it all makes a difference, regardless of how small each individual tweak is.
And it does, because so with Lee conducting the orchestra, we all come together. But so it does. It's a very interesting, because he pushes and prods, and then it takes us somewhere else we might not go. And so I'm going back to your question about how to approach a new project. It is I'm there as a director's one of the main collaborators and storytellers. So I'm obligated, and I want to feed off that person and then go down that journey with them.
We're shooting on film. We're using these vintage lenses for that anamorphic kind of look, making the tweaks like you had mentioned. Are you adding any filtration to the front of that lens?
We do. And I always, ever since I've started, I wouldn't say always, but I will always use some filtration on the front and sometimes on the back. My next project I'm going to play around with using some, I got some old silk stockings from the 50s and eBay, and I'm going to sort of play with those.
Oh, wow. Well, just to take a little tangent there, how would you use that?
Well, you stretch them on the back, across the back elements of. I haven't got anything to play here, but so that's like the front of the lens here.
Yeah.
Point at you, and the back of the lens as an element here, which is this bit.
So I've got my little Sony lens here. So I've got our front of the lens here.
Yep.
And you're talking about you actually put the silk stocking right against the back?
you stretch it over the back, and then you play with it, and you can tweak it however tight you do it, which angle you do it. Because if you do it twist it a wee bit, it becomes you see the angles, and some highlights become like an MTV style filter, like that.
Oh wow!
Which is good and bad. So Gosford Park, for example, I used nets on the back. I think LA Story I did, and Gosford Park, because of the candlelight, I found we're getting a star filter. So then I checked out different sort of filter which would match the stockings, so it didn't have this star filter thing. And so on United States vs. Billie Holiday, we didn't opt for the stockings, but I chose some Schneider black diffusion, black frost filters, which and Schneider have made these for me, and the way they make them is hand done with a spray, and they give another dimension, and what I call inviting the audience in.
Yeah.
Although there's a bit of glass in between what I call the audience, which is a camera thing, these lenses, there's a bit of glass in front, but I think it actually helps. You're not separating, you're inviting in. And for me, that's a big thing. So the filters we use are Schneider's.
Schneider Black Frost, they're called?
Yeah, Schneider Black Frost. And also some of the other sequences, we used a Bolex 16 millimeter clockwork Bolex.
Yeah.
For some of the scenes. And the beauty about the Bolex is that when the clockwork version is when you stop and start, the trigger it gives them flash frames. So within a sequence of shooting Billie Holiday singing or Andra, then I'd sort of cut the camera in camera, so it would just jump and the get rid of it. And you can't get it any other way, because the way the clockwork Bolex works, it takes a moment to build up to speed and a moment to die down and build up again. So it always can get these flash frames. And we once or twice we tried an electric motor on the side of the Bolex, and it didn't work because it got up to speed so immediately.
Yeah.
So you didn't get the same effect. But on the Bolex, because of those lenses, which are again very old, we didn't use any filters on that. That had its own sort of natural sort of patina about it.
And I love those moments in the film, because it really does when it almost feels like it's speeding up or slowing down. Like there's some real time ramping going on. And it's cool to see that was happening right there in camera. That's awesome.
It did. No, we definitely did it real. Because I don't think there's any, obviously with visual effects, people being on the same page and creating a post, you can, but it's like starting off with the concept of it and then explaining it to someone else and then describing it. And there it is. It's there. It's in the film. It's there forever. And we presented the editor and Jay, our editor, just loved it. He wanted more of it, so we used more.
Well, it's really great. And other things that you see within the film, too, are there's almost these little transitions between scenes occasionally where you'll go to black and white, and you'll just sort of have, like, you even changed the aspect ratio to kind of that old school aspect ratio. I love those elements. Did that idea come from you, or did that come from Lee?
I think it's a combination, not from me specifically, because that was more in the cutting room. We knew that they wanted to use some old footage, like New York. I think there's which is the big hotel is by Central Park, the Ritz-Carlton, or whatever it is, and there's a tilt down there. I think that was actually black and white, and they colorized it. And there's a shot of a bus, and they go from color to black and white and transition to the next scene without being
so cool.
Well, without sort of being, and I loved it. Some of the early cuts we had, it was a little bit sort of jarring, but then they used more of them, but then more and less, because it fed in naturally through black and white, through color, and then take us back to another source. It wasn't like, here we are. It wasn't sort of saying, here we are now in Philadelphia or San Francisco or New York, just like a banner or some other thing. It actually did give you a feeling again of going into the time and place of being there. And it felt organic and natural, which is why.
So you've got a lot of things going on to kind of give the film some softness. You've got the choice of film. You have the lens choices, those vintage lenses that have been tweaked. You're throwing some filtration in the front of it. Did you also incorporate haze into the room? Did you add atmosphere to your scenes?
We did, yeah. Particularly the stage performances, you could actually just read the spotlight, and
of course, yeah.
And, so that always helps. And I think one of the things about atmosphere, haze, you call it, is that you sort of see the light. So when I was starting out doing this, and I used quite a bit of smoke. I was in Liverpool somewhere, I think. And lunchtime, one of the producers came up to me and with a writer, and I said, and he said, "Tell me about smoke. Why are you using smoke?" I said, "I don't know. It just looks great, Just like I like it." And he, very upright English gentleman, he said to me, "I think it's because you see the light." And this is like very long time ago. And I remember always it's because you actually you feel the light. It has a natural.
Yeah.
It's not like a filter, where you're like, this glass. It actually is the same filtering all the way through. It's actually a gradated filter and gives you more depth. So we did use, where we could, most of the time, use some filtration, and we had a very, very terrific special effects person with us in Montreal, and the whole Montreal team were amazing. I literally came off a film in Vancouver. With a lot of visual effects on Friday, and I started in Montreal on Monday, and I didn't know anybody. And these guys, my camera crew, they seasoned people, all used film not very long ago, so they were into the whole film thing. Great gaffer, key grip, and I landed very lucky in Montreal. And it goes to the special effects people with haze, and they're always watching. That with haze, the atmos on a set, you have to have someone there while you're setting up that when we're ready and the actors are ready for that magic moment, that the atmosphere is there ready. They're not saying, "Oh, now the AD says," and then you're waiting another 5 minutes, and the moment dives, you lose it.
Exactly. Just balancing that is incredible, just to get the timing perfect. And also that there's not, when you're using atmosphere like that, I mean, there's a talent in just getting it to be evenly dispersed in the room, because you can get these puffy clouds where it's heavy in one spot and thin in another. I mean, you're adding a lot of complication when you add atmosphere. I don't think people really understand that unless they've used it.
No, when it's great, and you got the right people doing it, it's magic. And even what I call the Tony Scott principle, where you have a very strong backlight one way and you're very dense, and you look the other way and there's hardly any. I think that sort of conceit, or the other word, I'm a cameraman, not a word person, is that they always go with that, but you still can't have these clouds mushing around. So again, in Montreal, I was very, very lucky with the person doing it, because he's always watching and catching my eye and up, down. And it worked beautifully, and without any disruption, without anybody really knowing we were doing it.
Let's talk about the lighting for the United States versus Billie Holiday, because we talked a lot about the way that you created that vintage look with camera and lenses, but did you carry that through with lighting as well?
We did. We Eames Gagnon, my gaffer, who I hadn't worked with before, but he was totally committed, and we got on like a house on fire, and he was great. And so we decided fairly early on to use tungsten lights with Fresnel lenses in front of them, and minimize. Sometimes you have to use some LED, or modern day lighting, because you need to cover a big area with some soft light or whatever it is, or a little bit of light. But generally, we try to use old fashioned, 650s, 1Ks, 2Ks, 5s and 10s. And things with a nice Fresnel lens on it.
For your talent? For skin?
Yeah, talent too. And it's like, and the old-fashioned sort of key lights, what I call the Hollywood key lights, which, you don't see it all the way through the film, but where we could use it, we tried to. So you have the sort of feeling of the actor, just like the old Hollywood pictures where they see layers over it as Jim Crawford, just loving the lights.
Yes.
So you just use the reference, but they were created, of course, that's what they had. And going down the years of people using what's available, what's new. It's like now, we use the modern lights, and it's again, the cubic principle. Cubic, Shining, use Steadicam all the time because that's a new thing. And Clockwork Orange, you use radio lights all the time, so it's a new thing. So it's temptation to use new thing, but I think you really have to go back to one of your earlier questions, is to actually respect and feed off the material. What is that?
Yeah.
What are we going to use? How are we going to use it? Why are we going to use it? And therefore, then I think all those things, work against it, you work with it, which is natural enough. But I think sometimes we get seduced by, I'll probably be being guilty of it too, but sometimes we get seduced by, oh, this is a new gadget, a new type of light, whatever, and you try and use it. And it's actually always something that it just doesn't work because, someone up there, that great gaffer or storyteller in the sky is actually not letting it work, and he's struggling. And then, of course, anyway. But we did use a lot and try and keep it down with some practicals doing a lot of work, but supplementing with software. So in the background, you'd have what I think talked about earlier is the layers and the depth and other lights in the back to creating little pockets and sparks.
Sure.
So you can sort of keep the foreground down a bit, and get really into the soul of these characters. It's all a story, and it's such a fabulous story and such a privilege to be part of it.
So just inevitably, you have to incorporate LEDs nowadays in some spots for sure, just for some of those larger swaths of area that you were talking about before. But I love that you're using tungsten on skin tone and faces whenever possible, especially when you're trying to just replicate that look of the 40s and 50s, but also like it's just such a good quality light. You know what I mean? I think a lot of young kids coming up now that have only experienced LED, you kind of don't really, my encouragement is if you really only used LED in the past, I would just try to throw in a couple tungsten in there. They're cheap. They're cheap. Yes, they get hot, they're a little heavy, but they're inexpensive. You can throw them on your sets, and I think just throw them through a diffusion, and the light is just so nice.
Yeah, you can still create the same look, and they are. It's interesting because you don't have to look back far. I mean, this is before we get seduced is the wrong word in this circumstance, but what's out there, and you get your lighting package, and the production company agree to it. That's on the truck because that's what we use. But and you say they're very inexpensive, very cheap. So I would just have a few of these lights on there and just play. When you want the scenes, just play with it and see, well, that's interesting, that's great. And you like little kick somewhere, a little bounce eye light, and and you can even sort of create a book light, bounce and then back through diffusion.
Yeah,
type of light. And that with tungsten as opposed to LEDs is different.
Have you played with I think it's called Light Bridge. It's the mirror lighting. Like you'll have the one individual light source and then do everything else with mirrors. Have you played with that at all?
Oh, no, yeah. In fact, strange you ask that because one of my best friends, who's a cinematographer, and we used to work together as an operator when he's an operator, Jerry Vaspenter in London. And he introduced me to these just before my last shoot just started in October in London. We finished just 3 weeks ago, and he was encouraging me. So he and I sort of played around with a lot of the ideas of it, and then didn't use it. It's so strange. It was one of actually it's not me when I did whatever film it was in Dublin, and my camera says we did a lot of tests for day for night.
Yeah,
doing filtration on that film. I think it's kind of Monte Cristo, and he'd worked with I think Stephen Goldblatt, and they'd done a lot of tests on something, and then they didn't use it. And Stephen said to Kieran, his camera assistant, he said it's like you test for this film for what you can do on the next film, and that's the what you're just describing is that we tested it but didn't use it, and now it's because it sits in my memory back here that I will play with it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with it. I think I might invite somebody from the company on the show just to talk about the technique, because it's like I follow them on Instagram. I think it's called Lightbridge.
Yeah.
And it's just cool. The idea of having a single light source and then everything else is beamed through mirrors just sounds fun and techie and cool to me. Like I kind of want to try it out, but it seems like a completely different way of thinking, which is going to be a hard sell when you're working on a film with a huge budget. But I was just curious if you had it. No problem there. But let's take a quick break and talk about MZ. Now, MZ is Education for Creatives, which is perfect for the Go Creative Show audience. Because we all want to hone our craft. We want to get better at what we do, maybe learn some other skills that support our craft as well. I mean, I know for me, I love MZ because there's hundreds of hours of high-quality, video-based filmmaking education on things like directing, cinematography, post-production, visual storytelling, and more. So there's always something to learn. And now the educators on MZ are also really high quality. I mean, we're talking about people that are at the top of their game and working in the industry at high levels. Vincent LaFerre, Shane Hurlbut, Philip Bloom, right? The ARRI Academy is on there. In fact, Tom Cross, the editor for La La Land and Whiplash, he has a whole course on the art and technique of film editing. And it's right there on MZ. So we're talking about really high quality courses that are perfect for the creative community. Now, here's the thing. You can get 20% off simply by using GCS20 in the coupon code. So 20% for GCS20. And here's the thing. You can buy individual courses on MZ, and that's great. But I suggest you become an MZ Pro member, because when you become a Pro member, you get access to the entire library. Every single thing that's there, you have access to as a Pro member. And even that, you can get 20% off by using promo code GCS20. So check it out for yourself. Visit gocreativeshow.com/MZ. And don't forget to use that promo code GCS20 for 20% off. All right. Now, Andrew, let's get back into it. Let's talk about the concert scenes. In the United States versus Billie Holiday, we have a lot of shows. And she's performing a lot of different concerts, different sizes, small ones, big ones, and it also spans her entire career. And a lot of these performances are sort of related to where she is in her life at that moment in time. As a result, as a viewer, I'm seeing a lot of different looks in these scenes, a lot of different filming techniques, camera movements, lighting choices. It seems like each performance is like kind of its own little mini music video, if you will, or little mini movie, if you will. Is that intentional? Is that what you're doing? And if so, where did that idea come from?
Well, I'm flattered and thrilled that you get. It's apparent that each one is different because they are, and they're deliberately different.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, it's coming off what she's doing and the venue. But even within the same venue, like Club Ebony, we use different ideas and techniques. And then Ames, again, he's a gaffer. And I sort of worked out the color coordination, 20 what Dan Durant's, the production designer, was doing, and his guys were doing with the backings and the costumes, that we didn't contradict or clash with those. But sometimes in these stories, you have to clash deliberately. But we did deliberately try and get different looks going with the colors and the type of spotlights that she was in. So it didn't repeat. We weren't too repetitive. And I'm thrilled that you say that, because that's what we're aiming at. And so we didn't get too repetitive. The angles we chose, like Carnegie Hall, was much more when she comes out of that labyrinth of, after seeing the lynching, the burning cross, and going through the cabin, the shack, and having those moments all through that same building, coming out on the stage, Carnegie Hall, and seeing that. So that was very, in a way, very formal, because it's all about her and her heart and her feeling about the song.
Such a beautiful sequence too. My God, it's just awesome.
The build on it is so strong, and you don't then, once he gets, because we did, it's all basically one shot. Obviously, there's a cut to get on the stage, it's to do with respect. A word, hopefully, I don't misuse that word, but it's again, it's feeding off what she's doing. So we have to have certain things in place before Andrew comes on and see what she's doing. But we do know what the song is, what the song's about, and Lee will allow us to go with our feelings, which goes for all the people he gets around him, and hopefully he gets the right people around him. So then we all go with our feelings and responses. So as far as, and also the crew, because some of these performances we had 3 cameras. I was operating a camera, and then maybe on the crane or whatever. We may have Johan on the Steadicam, and then sometimes we switched to handheld, and we had Sylvain, the third operator, a woman from Montreal, operating a third camera. So each of those and we would actually get in again, I talk about the camera as a character, but once the camera people, the operators and the camera crew become as one with the story and the character, which doesn't always happen, because so many people come along on a daily, on so many films, they come along as a daily, and they come along and they say, what are we, in the British way, what are we doing, Gov? You know, where are we going to put this and that, the other? And that's coming. So because this has its own heart, and I was lucky enough to work with people who fed off that. So back to your question, is with the crew that I had and the grips, the crane operators, I could just feel my way around these situations really on the day. So it's a way of, and it sounds like a great luxury, but it wasn't, because we move very fluidly and easily and quickly.
Yeah.
And because it wasn't a long shoot at all, although it feels like it's basically an indie film, not quite like $3 million, but it's not huge either.
Sure.
So it feels like a much bigger film. So the reason I'm saying it's because
it looks much bigger too. I mean, the production design, the set builds, just all of it looks very expensive. It really does.
It feels really rich, doesn't it?
Yes, it certainly does. Let's talk about the use of camera movement in United States vs. Billie Holiday. And please do not take this as, this is meant as a compliment, although it may not sound like one. But when I watch it, it feels like there is a lot of techniques being used. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of changes. Like, the movie as a whole feels consistent and all seems like it's coming from the same place. But when you break it apart from individual scenes, it feels a lot like there's multiple things going on. There's multiple color palettes. There's different styles of, movement with the camera. There's different styles of shots. Like, I've never seen a film, or at least I can't remember seeing a film with so many different types of techniques in it that feels so consistent all the way through. It really is. It's an interesting way of approaching a piece like this, I thought. I mean, the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, there's so much going on, and it feels consistent even still. So I hope you're taking that as a compliment, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you've done that. I
think it's coming off Lee, but, and repeating myself here, but coming off Lee and the actors. But so I think it's a great. And thank you because I do treat this compliment, because earlier you were saying about the styles and how we change styles.
Yeah.
To change styles within a film and to still keep it cohesive and the one story, I think is if you say that, we pulled it off, because you want to. It just gets boring, because otherwise you can do. I know we're not back in an auditorium, we're back in the dressing room, we're back in somewhere else, and therefore the audience. So you're always keeping the audience. Alive. The audience, as I said earlier, the audience is one of the characters in the film. The cinema audience, I mean, our movie audience. So therefore, they have to be interested in embedded. What's the other word? Embedded or involved in the story.
Yeah.
And therefore, you want to keep them up, but not take them out of it, but keep them interested and not think, oh, here we're going to back in this area, we're going to back in that area, and with Jimmy Fletcher and his mother. We were in this quite opulent house, and I had a very quite sort of static. We were very keen to keep that sort of, because Lee wanted to make sure that the audience knew that black people just didn't live in all dingy basements. So they were, Jimmy Fletcher came from a very wealthy family. So there's a lot going on. Then we had, when we feel that each time there's going to be different ways of approaching. And again, I think we just did it. I mean, it sounds sort of crass, but there's no. It comes off the actors, and I'm repeating myself here, but it genuinely does. Lee and I talked about certain things, like when she first comes into Club Ebony, we studied the Cassavetes film. I think Faces, one of those, where there's a lot of handhelds to Cassavetes. The way Cassavetes worked was to get actors to not be actors, because we didn't have that. We had Montreal, great. Supporting artists, background actors. And so make them be right. So we had this sort of handheld thing going on, and other times we stole ideas from La Vie en Rose and things. But so there's within all those things that over the weeks of prep that Lee sort of feeds into my my soul. my heart and what little bit of brain I got left is that sort of then it sits there, and on the day it comes out because he might just say something, Andrew will do something, some of the other characters do something, and Eames has put this light up there doing something, and then the crane guys do something, and then everybody feels involved, and then it's not a separate. Which is great you said that, because it's not like a separate moment and we're showing off. It's not each thing is some rock video that we're just showing off. It's 2 minute, 2.5 minute thing, and then it's somewhere else. It's actually all part of the same thing. But a huge credit, of course, also goes to Jay, the editor, to give it that flow and bite and zest, and then play it down, sort of thing. But we, of course. In my team, and we gave them the material, which was privileged to be able to do that. But there were, and it wasn't sort of a planned approach. I think it just became its own thing. I mean, the thing when
there's some edit choices, basically, is what you're saying. Choices. Yeah.
But we did know that when she comes on stage and starts seeing the strange fruit, and the cops at the back of the building, at the back of the auditorium, and they get the nod, they all run up there. We were going to actually shoot that very handheld and sort of ragged in a way, so you get the help. So,
well, with in a film like this with so many different styles in there, decisions still have to be made when to employ those styles. So I'm curious, so like just if we were to isolate two kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, you've got the static, camera's not moving, it's on sticks, you're grabbing your primary shot, your over the shoulder shots, all of that, and then you juxtapose that with like a handheld, like you just mentioned. How are you making the decision what style to use? What has to happen in the scene to make it make sense for being on sticks or being handheld?
I mean, we never saw the tripod, but I know what you mean. It's like a dolly shot or something. It's a side of things. Yeah, but so going back to when she comes out of the shack. After seeing the lynching, it's her moment to sing Strange Fruit in Carnegie Hall. So that's like respectful. Of course, we're always respectful, but that's a very, and it's in this huge auditorium. It's about this thing, the celebration and heartache and everything. So that's quite static, and there's little bits of movement within it. But so there's a soft dance, and other times, as you said, we had sort of more. Ragged approach, when again feeding off the music. When the band is up and they're singing, they're playing the up tempo stuff. We go with that. So it's I mean, there were some choices before we got to there on the day, but mostly with choices on there. So I know there's not answering your question, but what creates those answers from the question on the day? I think we have all our stuff, our equipment, and the stuff there, so we can actually make those choices.
Yeah.
And feel off it. And when you got such a fantastic team, fantastic actors, they would just go with it. And and again, I'm not answering the question, but I sort of don't know. I mean,
you just feel it out, whatever feels right at that time.
And I think you can plan stuff up the wazoo, as we say, and then it sort of can feel like. I think you start off with a concept, and then you arrive, and it's different. Yeah. And I think that's what it's like. Dirk's. I always get directors who sometimes do storyboard, and I say, well, let's do some storyboard, do some plans, drawing, and overhead plans, whatever the actor's going to do, what they're going to do, where we're going to put the camera and things. And it's a template. Great, you get on the day, and the actor wants to do something different. We start off with a common purpose, and by doing that, and it's just true of this film also. But by doing that, although we didn't storyboard at all, but by doing that,
you didn't storyboard at all.
Nothing.
Wow.
And I think we didn't actually. Maybe like the shot in Times Square when she's walking across there, because that's a very complex visual effects thing. So that they get those visual effects people actually know that. But we we start off with an idea. I say about the director I work with, who we talk about storyboarding and planning, and then of course you arrive there in a common aim or concept of what it's about. Not necessarily what you're going to do. We have a plan what you're going to do, but you come with what it's about, the essence of it. And then when you get there, the actor comes with their own version of their essence, and together we sort of find it. It's always a working factor. So going back to this, it's like coming off. And also going to Cafe Society the first time with Jimmy. We go into that place, Jimmy Fletcher, we come into that place with him. So it's really his experience. And then we have, very quite soft, it's our introduction to her. And we're sort of feeling our way through. We're a little bit denied that. But then as we get into the heart, the soul, and the meat of the story, and we learn more about her, then we are allowed as a privilege of being respectful to that, in story terms, not camera and things, but as a privilege of respect of that journey that we've been allowed to, privileged enough to watch, then we get in deeper.
Plus, you also have the fact that there's sort of two realities going on. I mean, there's the reality of Billie and her experience as she sees it in front of her, and then there's the reality that she's under investigation and doesn't know it. So there's a lot going on in the film, and it's really ripe with possibilities because of that.
It is, yeah. So yes, and because it's her story, the line, what I call the truth of the line of the story, comes through. So we are, as filmmakers, allowed to diverge and divert and play and still come back because it has its own strength, its own, as a most beautiful oak tree growing, it has the roots, stability, and the foundation in the script. And then you have this tree trunk, and the branches go every which way, and we play around with the branches, but essentially it's coming back to the core. And the core is always there because that's who she is. And we are allowed to be party and privileged to that.
In our last few minutes, I want to hit on a couple of questions from Instagram. Christopher Souza asks the lens choices for shooting the film. Chris, we answered that earlier, so I hope you have your answer there. If you have any additional questions, and this is for anybody out there listening to the show, when you have additional questions, you can certainly reach out to us on social media, YouTube, anywhere, and we'll do our best to get those questions answered. We got a question from Blueberry on Instagram. How different is it to shoot a biopic and musical versus a rom-com? Is it always a serious filming atmosphere because of the genre? Good question. What do you think?
It's a very good question. I think it's a respect. And I think if a rom-com, which I have done quite a few, and so like Crazy Stupid Love, again, we're starting off with a fantastic script, so you're constantly respected that we have fun. Partly because of the people you're with, but someone like Steve Carell and Julianne Moore and all those guys will be serious about their intent because you have to still be serious about the intent. Otherwise, if you have a great time on set, laughing and joking, then the audience might not actually share that with you. So you have to be like, this is what we can do. So therefore, on this film, when it is deeply emotional and Andrew is in a deep emotional state, with the sense of Andrew as Billie, a deep emotional state, then we are very respectful of that. But so if the moment has to be, sometimes the moment can deliberately be broken because then it takes the edge off it. We can all get too serious about what we do. I think you just have to treat it with a little bit of lightness of touch that you're described properly. But it's something. What we do is very complex and tricky, so there's a respect to that from every department. So the actors respect, hopefully, what we do, and the great actors will respect the person who's might be doing the most menial task in the film. So it's respect of what we're there for to do. I think in the end, essentially, hopefully.
Yeah, no, and I think that answers it really, really well. And of course, we thank all of our audience for asking questions on the program. We like to do that a lot. So when we have upcoming guests and you're following us on social media, you will know about it. So you have an opportunity to ask your question. So Andrew, the film is beautiful. You did a great job, and thank you so much for being on. It's called The United States vs. Billie Holiday, and it's on Hulu. And even if you are not interested at all in the Billie Holiday story, which I don't believe that, if that's the case, because it's such a compelling story. But if nothing else, you've got to watch this film just for the look. It really is just stunning and beautiful and a great portrayal of the 1940s and 50s. It's not what you think when you think of a period piece. This is really something elevated, in my opinion. And it's Andrew Dunn and his team that made this all happen. So thank you so much, Andrew, for being on the Go Creative Show.
Well, thank you very much. It's a great privilege, and I've enjoyed it very much. And hopefully it shares some light on the subject and on what we do.
All right, I want to thank Andrew Dunn BSC, the Director of Photography for the United States vs. Billie Holiday, for coming on the show and talking to us all about his new film. Of course, you guys can check it out for yourself on Hulu right now. And I also want to thank our producer, Connor Crosby, for making the show happen behind the scenes. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com. And of course, Dave Siegel for mixing and mastering and making the show sound so good. You can find him at siegelsound.com. Of course, follow us. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We have a lot of YouTube exclusive content just for our YouTube audience, so please do check us out there. And when you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell, of course, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Of course, you can find us on your favorite podcast app simply by searching Go Creative Show. And links to all of these things are at gocreativeshow.com. I want to thank our sponsor, MZ Education for Creatives, and of course, all of you guys for listening to the show and participating, asking your questions, and sharing. We love doing this show, and thank you so much for listening. And with that, we'll see you next week on another episode of Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers.